ahead, look at this camera, and I will give you...
Which one? Which Darby? Up?
This one right here.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Welcome. This is Paul Johnson, and normally our podcast is called The New Frontiers, part of an Optimistic American podcast. But today, New Frontiers is sponsoring what we're going to do on a monthly basis with our new political party. Now, many of you may or may not know about the No Labels Party. The No Labels Party is a national organization that has been working on putting together a political party. They were looking at running somebody for president in the last presidential cycle. They formed a party here locally, and now we have to actually get candidates to run and be a part of the normal political process. We're actually on the ballot today. In fact, if you go to the motor vehicles division where you register to vote, if you look up the different names of how you can register, one of them is the No Labels Party. Now, we have a variety of guests with us today, some folks who are looking at running for office. I'm sitting here today with Larry Aldrich. Larry is an old friend of mine who we wrote a book together called What's Right with America, which ends up having a lot of the themes that we'll be talking about as part of the party itself as well. Let me just give a small start, and hopefully it will help us understand kind of what we're going to try to do today. So the first thing that we want to try to do today is we want to try to make certain that we give an introduction and an open forum to people to talk. We'll do this on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. We plan to open it up, give people a chance to ask questions about what's going on inside of their party, inside of a structure that's designed around independent and unaffiliated voters who have been largely cut out of the process. Two of my guests today, hopefully that will be on, is Sarah Smallhouse, who's on the board with me, as well as Ted Hinderocker. I think Chuck Coughlin's out there somewhere. There's Chuck, my old buddy. But we were deeply engaged in running an open primary system that was designed to try to make certain that we could run open primaries where literally anyone could run and you as the voter could have a choice as to who you wanted to vote for. The political parties can't agree on much, but the one thing they definitely agreed on is how much they hated us. They put together a pretty big effort to try to defeat us, and they ended up being successful. We got about 40% of the vote. And what that's left us with is the ability to form and create and run with a third party. Here's the good news. We didn't have to create anything. The No Labels group decided to work with us. They thought that we were a good group to be able to go out and do what needed to be done to make this party work. We're going to talk a little bit, though, about the open primary issue because it was an important part of the process. It's an important part of this party in terms of what we're forming. Again, we have a variety of different guests on today, but I'm going to start with my guest, Larry Aldrich, who's here with me. And the reason I'm going to start with Larry is that he and I, in working on this book, one of the things that we focused on, or the thing that we did focus on, were economic issues that surround the United States of America. The big question that we should always ask is this: how did the United States become so prosperous? I mean, we are far and away the greatest superpower in the history of the world. There's nothing like the United States. And we wrote a book talking about why. One of the things that's happening is that not only is one party walking away from many of those principles, but both parties seem to be. And they're basing much of their ideology on a very pessimistic view about who the United States is. And it is usually not based on data. Larry, if you want, maybe I'll let you give a little bit of a description of the book itself, and then because we'll use that a couple of times here to talk about different issues.
Great, thank you. And welcome to those folks who are on video, and look forward to meeting many of you. Nice to be characterized as your old friend.
Yes, we're both old, Larry.
And old is objective and friend is subjective, so the emphasis has to be on old. We wrote the book really at a time where we were saying there's just a lot of downers about what's wrong with America. You know, America needs to be reinvented or blown up, or it needs to be driven in some different way. And we said, we don't think so. And your podcast was really spending a lot of time on that. We tried to be objective. I think we were objective. We tried to recognize the challenges. We try to make sure we're data driven. We're not naive people. We are, eyes wide open that there are some challenges. And I think, certainly speaking just for myself, the current administration is creating lots of challenges to the long-term health of our country. So we have to really be focused on the data, focused on the objective position we're in, but also it's the time for people to reach in and redefend their democracy, grab those important issues that make America great, and economy being one of them. I happened to take my wife down to one of the protests over the weekend, and the no capitalist signs are everywhere. Like the answer to whatever alternative to fascism or authoritarianism is blowing up the capitalism system, and that is just incredibly stupid. The answer is the capitalistic system. So I think we had our eyes wide open, and I think the book was trying to get focused on the long term, and I think we all need to double down, roll up our sleeves, get to work, re-underscore the importance of American democracy, and come out even stronger than before.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the detail on those issues, especially on economic issues as the podcast goes on here. But I want to call on my old friend Chuck Coughlin. Chuck, hopefully you can hear us. You were deeply engaged in the open primary, and my interest in asking you to say something here is, man, you put a lot of capital on the line on that one. You put on Mike, there, Darby, but you put a lot of capital on the line on that one. You've been engaged in the political system for a long time. You've worked for a couple of different governors in the process. You've been a long time Republican, or you were a long time Republican, and you also are a lobbyist. And none of the things that you did on the open primary could have been helpful to you economically. So this is my question: why the heck did you do it? What was the idea?
Well, we got to the point where, I got into the business, Paul, for the very same reasons you guys are all talking about. And that is to elect good people, to have a opportunity to have democratic excellence coupled with capitalism. And what I see today is a system that doesn't provide those options, just as your other guest was saying just here. And I couldn't run campaigns anymore. I didn't want to run a campaign for anybody that was a committed Democrat, or under the current rubric, or a committed Republican under the MAGA rhetoric. I just couldn't do it anymore. And it was sad to me. It was sad. And, Sarah and Ted and people came, and I was very grateful they came and asked, what should we do? And so we engaged in a long process to define what it is that we were going to do. And we came up with a plan. It had its faults, as we all know. It had its challenges. And as you mentioned, Paul, it did not come without a cost. And in my faith, having something cost you is a sign of doing the right thing. And so I was happy to engage with all of you with the idea of trying to fix it. And the simple problem is that 80% of congressional and legislative candidates get elected today in an uncompetitive primary, where you win the primary, you're good. You win the general election. And I just don't think that's the way our forefathers or the people who founded this country envisioned the system. They wanted to see a competitive discussion of ideas that the American people could vote on. And we just don't have that anymore. It's not available to us. I continually meet really bright people who come up to me all the time and go, "Hey, I want to run for office." And I go, "No, you don't. You can't do that anymore without acknowledging the field you're playing on." And so I was super blessed to work with you guys, Sarah, Ted, and many, many others. And we did our best. But as you alluded to at the top, a two-front war is never a good war. And so we had a war with both the Republicans and the Democrats. I think we all made the strategic miscalculation that we didn't think the Democrats were going to be as opposed as they were. But as you alluded to earlier, Paul, they weighed in heavily. I think I was given an award for the most unlikely opponents of our initiative, and that was the MAGA crowd and Planned Parenthood. All on the same page in opposing us. And so it just became very, very difficult to try and navigate. But this
to
is
me,
how we learn.
The issue, a couple of things I think are important. The first one is, if you ask me, the ideal is not a third party. The ideal would be to change the way that the primary system works. If you gave me the ideal, that would be the way to do it, and to force candidates to run against one another. But the reason that both parties oppose it is self-interest. This is their self-interest. MAGA thinks if they can keep running against the woke left, they're going to win. And the woke left thinks that they can win if they keep running against the MAGA right. In fact, I would tell you, no one wanted Trump to be the nominee on the Republican side more than the Democrats running against them. Overwhelmingly, they thought that that was going to serve them well. And it's pretty much the same on the Republican side. They love the idea of Mom Donnie winning in New York. They love it because they realize it does harm to the other side. And in the meantime, there are a whole bunch of really important issues at the state level: water, the ability to supply our energy needs, our educational needs. At the national level, what's going on with a balanced budget and dealing with tariffs and an economy that's been harmed, that those issues really aren't being talked about, and they're not being debated because effectively we're focused more on the much more divisive issues. Do you think that's a wrong analysis, the way that I'm looking at it?
No, both parties are playing to the extremes, which is their base. That is both the base of both parties today. And in a primary election where 20% of Republicans and 15% of Democrats participate, that's their audience. That's what they want to do. That's who they turn out. And that's how they win partisan primaries, with those very narrow segments of their own party. And then that's the choice we're all left with. That's what we have to choose at the end of the day. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your analysis, Paul. You've been around this block more times than I have, I fear to say. I remember when you were the boy mayor. So I have the high regard for you and your guests. I'm not telling you all anything you don't already know.
Yeah, if they ever have a play here about Don Quixote, they're going to have me stand in for him. I'm pretty sure about that. All right, so let me go to
a line of us in back of you, Paul.
Yeah, well, Sarah, I wanted to go to you. Sarah is on the board with me of what today is called the No Labels Party. But Sarah, I just want to point out, like you made a major investment, you and your sister, your family, in trying to change the political system. You were engaged in the open primary fight. Now you're engaged in helping on this political party. Talk to me about why. What there are a lot of other things you could be doing in your life. I know you've put a focus on education with your foundation, but why are you committing such an effort in your life to reform?
Foundational institutions have to hold, and our current system is not incentivizing a sustainable future. We have to change the system. And I wish we could have done it with 140. And because our elections are all state by state, Arizona is the biggest geography I think I can impact, at least in the short run. And we didn't get 140 for all the reasons that have been discussed. And so this is our next best idea. And I'm in. I want to fix it. It's not working. Like, we have to fix it. That is the task of the moment.
Yeah, our political system is way underserving us. Ted, you're here also. You've helped us out in a variety of issues, both in the open primary and as the new party here begins to get formed. First, I'd like to thank you and maybe tell me why you've been actively engaged in this.
Well, this goes way back to when I was a student, which is a long, long time ago. But did an internship in the legislature, state legislature, and I've heard you allude to the same thing, Paul. You know, back in the days when Burton Barr was Speaker of the House, and you had Alfredo Gutierrez over in the Senate, and things got done. And you had groups that caucused over issues like the universities or the Southern Arizona Caucus, and there was bipartisan cooperation. And I've just watched the steady deterioration of our political system, and it's gotten to the point where nothing gets done. You know, it's the legislature and the state and at the federal level is run by, you know, the leaders of the party, and if you don't fall in line, you're out because you're targeted in the next partisan primary and you're gone. So everybody's faced with a Hobson's choice. You know, either you fall in line or you lose your job, and that's wrong. And it is just it's become ever clearer to me that the way to fix it is you know, to create more choices and an open primary system. I'm really disappointed we didn't make 140, but doggone it, it was a good effort. And you know, Chuck's absolutely right. We got torpedoed by the left and the right, and it's impossible to overcome that, or very difficult. So this is something that dropped in our laps, really. This new party, no labels had qualified for the ballot, and they've gotten the requisite signatures, and that's a very expensive process. And we had talked about forming some sort of third party that would allow independent candidates, anyway, access to the ballot. And this was a gift, and we don't want to waste it. So that's why I got involved.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to you, and we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of other issues. Like we're going to go through a name change. We'll talk about why and how people might be able to participate in that. But I have been out talking to people, and a lot of people have been calling me that are interested in taking part. And somewhere around 20 candidates have thrown their name in with me, saying that they'd like to run for office. And many of them are very bright, smart people. And we're going to try to give a chance to some of those candidates every time that we have one of these shows to talk a little bit about themselves. Now, I have two candidates, I think, here today. And the first one is Dr. Neil Stronger, who I think is looking at running for the superintendent of public instruction. Neil, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Neil, why don't you talk just a little bit about yourself and why it is that you think that you're running, and why it is that you picked the No Labels Party to do that.
Okay. My name is Dr. Stephen Neal Jr. I'm actually a native of Arizona. I'm very excited about being here. One of the reasons that it attracted me to No Labels is because we don't have to follow people just based on their own political agenda. We do our homework. We go with what I call common sense. And my biggest thing is running for Arizona State Superintendent of Public Instruction is that it should be students over politics. Right now in the world of education, you see everyone wants to push their agenda. If you go 23 years of looking at our last superintendents, they were either Democrat or Republican. And what I realized when I was on the Republican ticket is that if I ran on the Republican ticket, I'm going to be hurting kids that come from Democrat, Green, and liberals. If I actually ran on Democrat, it's going to be vice versa. And anyone who knows me is I always put students first. And I want to make sure kids learn, no matter what political affiliation that their parents may be affiliated with, they have a right to learn. And it's important that we keep politics out. And now, what I like about No Labels is this seat is a bipartisan seat. And you have to be someone that can bring people together. You got to unify them. You may not always agree with what the other person has to say, but you can respect them and come to some kind of respectful conclusion of how to best educate students. And also to mark change. The biggest thing in our education, as one of you young men said earlier, is that with politics, just like with politics, it's the same way with education. And you look at how education has been, and we've been doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and we're getting the same results. That's called insanity. And so for me, I want to go in and change the world, change our field of our education. And if you notice me, I don't say your kids, these are our kids. It's our community. And we must unify as one in order to bring them all together. And under no labels, I'm able to do that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn to another candidate I think is on, Mike Zapita. Mike, are you on right now? Maybe. Okay. All right. Well, Mike was a candidate. Here. Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello.
So Mike is a candidate. He has an interesting background. He told me that he was interested in running if it was kind of an independent group or a no labels type of group. But Mike had a background both as a history teacher. He worked with special ed kids. He also has his own small business. And I just found it interesting. I've known Mike for a while. He has a long list of accomplishments and support for people inside the community. But in any event, something came up there not too good.
You guys just got hacked.
Yeah.
He's getting hacked.
That's a Democrat.
It's not showing on the stream.
It's not showing on the screen. Okay, well,
That's good.
Yeah, I'll just say to the audience,
you're lucky.
You're lucky that you're not having to see what we're seeing on the screen right now. And of course, my other guys are coming in now to see what's on the screen, and I just would recommend to them they don't want to. But in any event, so Mike, you are interested in running for office, but what raised your interest in this? I mean, you're a young guy who's been actively engaged as a school teacher and a business guy. Now you're going to add something else to the possible list. What attracted you here?
Well, when I was back getting my master's degree during COVID, I read a book about stewardship, and the premise of that, of being a good steward, is to take care of something. And I think with having been a teacher and knowing that that was something that I wanted to do, taking care of my community, taking care of my people has always just been something that's just innate within me. As a history teacher, I'm always trying to promote my students, to look at both sides, to try to like really figure out, like, before you lock in on your own position, pros, cons, and other, like to really have an open mind, because sometimes it's not the left that's right or wrong, and sometimes the right's not right or wrong. And it's just because the messaging came out there incorrectly. And the biggest thing that I'm noticing with the message that we have out there is that we're doing a lot of yelling at one another. We're doing a lot of demonizing one another, but we're not really listening. And to me, it seems like it goes back to when I was a child and my parents would say, we're going to vote for the best of the two bad choices. It's automatically assuming that, the options that they have for political office are bad. And I think with this party, no labels, giving, the American voter an opportunity to have another option out there, something else to consider, because it seems like nowadays it's so polarized. You're either extremely left or you're extremely right. And maybe you're not. What happened to the people that are in the middle? The people who just say, I just want to be able to take my kids to school. I want to be able to work. I want to be able to like provide for my family. And where are those, those people's voices being heard? And so that's kind of why I lean more towards this party, which says, what are our values? And our values are looking out for what's right and being able to have a constructive dialogue.
All right,
that's what led me towards this.
I'm going to ask you a question, because I agree with your last statement, which is we frame everything, because we have two parties, as a binary choice. Everything's a binary choice, right? If you pick, you want to be pro-education or pro-business. And of course, my answer to that is I don't know how you could possibly be pro-business without being pro-education. Or you can be pro-labor, you can be pro-business. I don't know how you can be pro-labor if you're not pro-business. The list just goes on and on and on regarding these binary choices, which I think are false binary choices. But from your standpoint, you've kind of been on both sides. You have a small business, and you've also been a history teacher as well as a special ed teacher. Oftentimes, those two groups are seen in battle with one another. How do you reconcile that in your own mind?
In all reality, the way I look at that is we're all working together to kind of accomplish the same thing, which is harmony. And not to sound so, big with that word, but you need the balance between the two. A business owner wants to have a workforce that is educated, that can make decisions on their own, that they don't have to necessarily look out for every way because they're representing your business, your brand, and they're out there in the world. A teacher wants to make sure that when their students leave the classroom, that they're able to make informed decisions, that they're able to justify what decisions they made on their own and feel good about themselves. When they become young adults, can they look at a rental contract and read it and not, feel like they're getting taken advantage of, or when they want to buy their first car? They both go hand in hand with one another. Both require you to have some basic knowledge of what's going on in our world.
All right, that's awesome. All right, so I'm going to take this as an opportunity, because you talked about values, just to put up kind of our preliminary list of values. People can feel free to comment on these either as they're coming up or at the end. I might take the opportunity to ask a couple of questions when we're done, but Darby, if you would, just hit that group of slides. I think it starts at slide 72. And I might have to have you don't have it pulled up there. I might have to pull it up on my own phone, because
Got it there.
back in the old days, I actually could see a distance away, but as time goes on,
There you go.
there we go. Oh, that was big and now it's gone. Okay. So these are just different beliefs that we've begun to kind of work on as in terms of what we see as being important. And they're probably more here than we should have, and maybe there are some that we've left out. We're always open for input on that. But we start with this concept of we love America and see no other nation in history that's done more for human progress than the USA. The whole idea of this is that we're proud of who we are, and we think that the data, again, points out that there are good things that have happened here. Next slide. This is so overlooked, but we can still love and respect people who we disagree with politically. And I think that is an important element that is oftentimes left out of politics. Look, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, we're not trying to eliminate them. We think that both those parties have something to offer the general public. We think that they both have ideas that are important. We think the debate in itself is important. But independents and unaffiliated voters today make up almost a third of the electorate, and they're cut out of the process. They matter as well. Next slide. We support civil rights, equal rights, human rights, but also property rights, free speech, free trade, the free market, and accessible and open elections. And what you'll see, you can almost divide that right after human rights and realize, okay, the top one is kind of what the left supports, and the bottom one is what the right tends to support. And the answer is our founders knew from the beginning they were all important. Next slide. This is increasingly becoming a bigger issue, which is our federal debt is at a crisis level, and balancing our budget is essential to building jobs and making America strong. The point I would give on this is the thing that if we do not get our arms around it, I think it is a huge long-term crisis for the United States, maybe even a short-term crisis. What we saw in the deficit that happened in this cycle with the big, beautiful bill, I mean, there are lots of complaints, and certainly Biden did his job to increase the federal debt as well. That was the complaint by many Republicans on the right. But this particular budget takes us from $37 trillion to $60 trillion, with the $5 trillion added by them in the additional interest rate. There are some people who, like Ray Dalio, who's saying if interest rates are at 5 or 6 or 7%, which they may be, that effectively we could be put into a position where somewhere around 40 to 50% of our budget could be being spent in debt service. But the single biggest issue to the middle class is this. If you want lower interest rates, which are going to help you in your everything from your credit card debt to buying a home, this issue is going to have to be addressed long term. Next slide. This is the one that Chuck was talking about, Sarah was talking about, Ted was talking about, and that we believe every voter and every candidate, regardless of party registration, should be treated equal. To us, that's just fundamental. And if you allow them in, if you include that group of voters, you're going to change the outcomes. Next slide. We support investing more in education, improving outcomes, and giving parents better choices. But we want reforms in the classrooms, not the bathrooms. The point here is what I think you see oftentimes is that we have a right wing that tends to like reform, but they don't like to really fund education. We have a left wing that's big on providing the funding, but they don't want any reforms. Reforms are important, but you also have to provide the right level of funding for education. Next slide. We reject the politics of grievances. And blame. Blame doesn't balance the budget, and grievance doesn't build homes. Now, the reason this one's important is it is a very small percentage of people who actually vote inside the primaries. That's why we all worked on the open primary concept so hard. If you did the math on it, about 70% of the public's registered to vote, a third are Republican, a third are independent, independent or unaffiliated, and a third are Democrat. But only 30% of them show up inside the primary election. That 30% represents about 8% of the public. And I can tell you, I've seen a lot of polling on this. That group of people, they're grievance voters. The single most important issue to them is how much they hate the other side, how much the Republicans hate Democrats or Democrats hate the others. And we're not going to fix our problems through that process. Today, those are your only choices. Next slide. We support and we're grateful for the U.S. military and law enforcement personnel who keep us safe. This seems like it would be gratuitous, except that it's not. It's not, because I think there's been some disrespect for what's happened in military and law enforcement with defund the police and other items. Next slide. We believe in all the above energy strategy necessary to meet America's energy needs, including oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables. Next slide. We believe that you have to make things easier to build things in America. And the point here is that through regulations, through an economy that oftentimes is built more based upon protecting us on a variety of different interest groups or interest issues that we're concerned about, we've oftentimes made it difficult to do the things that we need to do, like being able to build housing. Next slide. We believe when government increases cost or excessive regulations, taxes, and fees, it harms the ability of our citizens to achieve the American dream. Next slide. We put our country before any political party. Chuck worked on a campaign for John McCain, and I'm not sure, but I think that was their campaign's motto. But again, you would think that this is a throwaway line, except that it's not today. People are putting their parties way above our country. And that, to me, is one of the single biggest issues that we have to confront. Next slide. We believe in Dr. King's dream of an America where we're all judged by the content of our character, not by the color of our skin. Next slide. We believe America is a force for good. We value our allies, our military, and our history. Both are essential to peace and stability. Next slide. Okay, that's it. I'm going to leave the rest of those out, but I'm going to start with, before I move forward too far on this, I'm going to go back to Chuck just for a moment. Chuck, as we've been thinking about kind of how to form the basis of what we believe, as opposed to having a platform that digs into issues where the divides are just already well established, we wanted to try to focus on the concepts that we saw as being important in the open primary. Give me your thoughts on that. Do you think we hit it or missed it? Do you think there's more that ought to be added? How do you view that from a political standpoint?
All of those things are critically important. What we have to learn how to do is communicate that in this very toxic environment. And that we're in. As you said, both parties are committed to hating the other party. I mean, the good book itself says, hate is wrong. It's a wrong-headed thing. It from the minute you open your mouth and to be hateful is to be wrong. And I think what we have to cultivate as a community is gratitude. And all of those slides speak to that. What we value is what has been built by people before us. There's that famous quote I love: we build on foundations we did not lay, we sit in the shade of trees we did not plant, we drink from wells that we did not dig, and we benefit from people we never knew. Those are the kind of things that we speak to. All of those things that you just mentioned there, Paul, are things that I think can draw people together. Because America is a great country. It is designed to be together. That was our founders' vision, is to work together, not at polar opposites with one another. And all of those things you just mentioned are home run things. But again, in an environment where it's built, as Mr. Neal said and others have said, it's a system that's built not to value those things. We've allowed both parties to run the system, run our elections, and they are committed, as you just said, to their own power, to nothing which you just talked about there, to nothing which is grateful for what we just talked about. I think a no labels can create a brand if that's what we're focused on, which would be ultimately attractive to people. But it's a long slog under this current system, as you and I both said. It's a third party is a really, really hard way to go because our culture is so committed to this binary choice right now. And maybe it'll happen faster than we think. I don't know. I'd like to believe that. But all those values you expressed in there are home runs, and everybody supports them. That's the crazy thing. Most people support that. Sarah knows that. Ted knows that. That's what most people support. It's just not what we're being offered today.
So, Ted, I'm going to change subjects just a little bit. You and I have been working on the name change issue. Let's, if you would, kind of give a description as to, why we're doing a name change, the fact that we've committed to no labels to doing that, and then the process maybe that we're going through as well. Can you help us on that?
Sure. So we approached no labels because we're toying with the idea of running an independent candidate, perhaps for governor, just to draw attention to the fact that independents are excluded from the process. But it was so incredibly expensive, and barriers to entry are so high that it was almost impossible to do. And so we got in touch with no labels. They were in the process of concluding a lawsuit with Adrian Fontes, Secretary of State for the state of Arizona, over the control of the party that they had been registered. They had registered the state of Arizona, which is the No Labels Party. So No Labels National wanted the ability to determine, which races would run under the No Labels banner and flag, and in which races they would ignore. And the Ninth Circuit initially sided with them, but then a panel reviewed it and said, no, you can't do that. So at that point, No Labels, because their intention was never to form a new political party, but rather to have a third party alternative for president. They decided that they didn't really want to control the state of Arizona No Labels Party. So that's where we came in, and Paul contacted them. Don Budinger with our group was instrumental in that. And we negotiated a memorandum of understanding that said basically that they would turn over control of the party initially to directors, but they wanted a name change. So they wanted us to change the name of the party so that people knew that it wasn't directly controlled by No Labels National, and we agreed to do that. So that's the impetus for the name change. In terms of how we're going about it, we have a list of No Labels voters, and our thought is that it's very important not to disenfranchise these voters. There's almost 40,000, and that's in itself a significant block, and a block that politicians in a very closely divided state have to pay attention to. So we're polling our registered voters about a name. We didn't want to get too far afield, so we have several name choices. And I don't know if you want me to get into that, Paul, or if you want to do it. But we have several name choices that we put out in an email blast to no labels voters to get their input. And then we're going to consider that, and we're going to submit a name to the Secretary of State. It has to be approved by the Secretary of State, but ideally it has some connection to the past, to the No Labels group, and also looks forward to the exciting opportunity to run multiple candidates and make a difference.
Yeah, I can tell you, I when we first started the party, we put out a press release. I didn't know how wide the distribution would be for the press release. I didn't have a lot of hope for how far it would go, but however far it went, one of the things that we put inside of this was, if you're interested in recommending a name, here's an email address, and you can email that in. I've been shocked by how many names that I've gotten. I have a very long list of names that have come in from people. Now, some were saying, "Hey, just leave it like it is. I like the no labels." The Beyond Labels has come up more than once. The Independent Party or Arizona Independent Party or AZ Independent Party have come up more than once. The Reform Party has come up. There have been a variety of different names, but we're probably going to make that decision in the next week or so. We'll have to have a vote of the board, and then when the board votes, we'll send a letter off to the Secretary of State talking about what that change will be, assuming that the change is going to take place. And again, as Ted said, we have agreed with the No Labels Party that we will create at least some distinction between the two groups so that people don't confuse them. And I think that's only fair. We're going to have candidates running that are going to be independent. And one of the things that happened in the lawsuit that Ted was talking about was that the National No Labels Party didn't think they should have to open up the primaries if they didn't want to go manage running candidates. And the court was pretty clear on that. They said, no, if you're going to have a political party in Arizona, you have to open up the election and people have to have a right to run, which I think was the right choice. And it was good for us because it's exactly what we'd like to do anyway. All right. With that, I'm going to talk about, I'm sorry.
I have a question. With the name, if the name changes and it goes to the Secretary office, does that mean candidates who are currently running under no label would have to redo all the paperwork, or will the name just automatically switch and we can keep our signatures and people that have already signed our petition? Would that remain the same?
So I'll let Ted answer this after me, but feel free, Ted, to disagree with me if you think so. The organization doesn't change. The organization it's a party. It's registered at the federal level. It falls under a certain tax category, and at the state level, it's the exact same party. From all structural purposes, it's exactly the same. It is just simply a name change. And so I believe the only thing that a candidate would be affected by would be the branding issues, as opposed to the issues that relate to having to go refile paperwork and refile their information. Ted, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, this is an area that hasn't been really addressed before, but I would agree with that 100%, Paul. It's like a corporation. If you hold stock in a corporation, the corporation changes its name. It's not like you're divested of the stock, right? It's the same entity. It just has a different name. Mm-hmm. So my guess is that's how it's going to be treated. Now, you can't guarantee somebody's not going to file a lawsuit to challenge that. But I think Paul's absolutely right. It's simply the name that's changing, not the party itself. It's still the No Labels Party that would simply be known by a slightly different name.
And Neil, I might ask you, you've done just a little bit of research from a candidate standpoint about filing and collecting signatures and that type of thing. You're probably on the lead on that one. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you found so far?
So far, I found with switching over to no labels, I've been invited to both Democrat and Republican events because they don't feel threatened and they see that I'm there for the best interest of the people. And the biggest thing coming from the Republican side is those who stand by the Constitution. Democrats, they just want equal opportunity among people and a fair opportunity for people to have education or have rights. But someone who's going to stand up for people if they're being oppressed from the Democratic side. So for me, it's been a lot easier now collecting signatures, being at that forefront, because I did have to start all over because I was on the Republican ticket, as I stated before. However, I started all over from scratch. But it's a lot easier now because now people want to hear my message. Before, when they knew I was tied to either party, it was automatically doors shut. I'm Democrat, I'm not dealing with you. Or I'm Republican, I don't have time for you. But now with me being no labels, it's like, okay, let me hear your message. Oh, I like your message. Oh, I'll sign. Or what can I do in order to introduce you to so-and-so of this party? And I think being no labels, it actually has opened the doors for me to meet people. Like I always tell people, people that you read about or that you hear about, that's very powerful. Now those people are wanting to sit down with me and talk with me.
Yep. And we will do another show that'll spend a lot of detailed time on candidates. In fact, we're going to put together a series of educational films that will be helpful to candidates to think about their campaigns. But one of the big issues will be you have to go out and collect signatures. And when you collect signatures, you can collect signatures from independents, you can collect it from unaffiliated voters, and you can also collect it from people who are registered in the No Labels Party or whatever name that we have at that point in time. If we can, I'm going to make a little bit of a shift. We've got about another 15 or 20 minutes here. And I want to talk just a little bit about issues because I find this to be interesting. And I'll turn back to Larry on this one, but then I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel to get their input. This is my thinking, just my thinking, how I see it. Again, we gave a statement of beliefs. The statement of beliefs are what we all agree on, but this is Paul talking as opposed to the party in total. So I think there's no bigger issue that we're going to have to address in the next 2 years than the economy. I think it's going to be front and center. I think it's going to be the single biggest issue. My read, the way I read what is happening within the Trump administration, is that he is moving to the left on economic issues. Tariffs weren't a right-wing issue. Tariffs were a left-wing issue. In fact, immigration in many ways was a more of a left-wing issue because organized labor for a long time had opposition to it. Taking percentages of companies, taking control over the feds, having more of a control over our monetary policy. All those are issues that are not moving to the right. They're moving to the left economically. At the same time, that puts Democrats in a tough position where they're struggling to figure out who they are. And so the only answer I think they have is they're moving further to the left. And so we're now starting to see some socialist candidates that are coming up. The reality is, I'm going to call it this, I think the way that you run against Trump on the economic issue is by running to the right. Now, saying that, balancing the budget, having a free trade agenda, being a supporter of technology and helpful to technology. The last president you go back to that did all three of those things was named Bill Clinton. So I don't know, maybe you could say that was a right-wing policy. But the point is, today, those are clearly on the right-wing side. But if you look at what works, we have a long history of being able to show that works. You know, one of the points that we made was if you look at just the actual numbers that exist today, you know, from the 1990s when we were putting together the free trade agreements, one of the issues that was a big issue was whether or not we were going to get intellectual property rights written into law internationally, because we knew we did really well on creating new products. Well, when we passed the GATT agreement and other agreements that brought in the ability to get those intellectual property rights, there was some loss of jobs that went out in manufacturing. Although if you look at the real numbers, we actually produce more product in manufacturing today than ever before. We have less jobs because technology began to take up some of that space. However, we vastly expanded in areas like Google and social marketing companies, Facebook and others. For that matter, any type of company that was based upon data or intellectual property rights, we saw massive expansion and we gained about 80 million jobs. It was a huge number. In fact, if you go to the state that from a GDP standpoint, of the G7 nations, we were all about the same in 1992 From 1992 to today, the United States has doubled them in GDP per person. Our lowest state was Mississippi. Mississippi was running somewhere around, I think it was 80, well, I can't remember the exact number, but what I do remember was that it was higher than any other G7 nation with the exception of Germany. Point I'm giving is we did pretty well under that system. I think one of the issues here is, it was addressed by the candidate, Michael, which is there really is a connection between our ability to have a strong business community and our ability to pay for social programs. They're interconnected, and both of them become important. If you don't have the social programs, then you'll have social problems that come about, ranging from the need for education to being able to make certain that we're helping people who oftentimes are more disadvantaged. But the way you pay for those is through a strong economy. And the only evidence that exists that you can build a strong economy comes more from those same agenda items that Clinton espoused. Larry, give me kind of your thoughts on that and what we saw in the book.
I think we just say the congregation says amen.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part, I think it's very important that your party is thinking about the issues on the economy. We run a risk of narrowing the economy to mean deficit spending.
Mm-hmm.
We run the risk of narrowing the economy in the federal government. We have to really go back, I think, to what the founders of America cared about, which is individual rights and freedoms, and that what the founders did by creating this country that became the United States was enabling people to do the work that they chose to do. And if they were smart about it, they chose the work that would provide them with the highest income. And so not only do some of these challenges start to restrict that, and you're right about tariffs. Tariffs is a regulation. It's regulating the economy through pricing, through tariffs. So all of these regulations have come in place. Arizona has often been on the leading edge of trying to enable people to work. So I'm a lawyer. The state has been trying for years to expand how we get more people with legal knowledge to help other people. It's very difficult when you have these requirements to be a lawyer or a doctor, or you down the list. And obviously most of those are safety issues, and you have to respect those. We care about those. But when they are designed to restrain people from doing jobs they could do, we have a problem. And that problem goes right down to the individuals, goes right down to why I think many independents are just sick and tired of the Democrats and Republicans, because they all want to take something in a different other way. They want to, for the most part, be left alone to think what they need to think, to believe what they need to believe, to practice their faith or no faith which they wish, because the power is around them and their family. And so that economy is so critical. It's absolutely critical that we get the deficit down. It's absolutely critical that the federal government live within its means. One of the things that drives me crazy about a number of my Democratic friends is in the constant conversation now, I've not heard one Democrat ever say, where would they reduce federal spending? You had your list that showed the deficit. If you looked at those numbers, revenue has continued to climb over the last 10 years. Expenses have rapidly increased under both administrations. So, if we get back to the foundations of America, the foundations of America are freedoms of individuals to decide what to do, and then to come together and give up a part of those freedoms to create a consensus. And that's what happens in parties, creating a consensus. That's what happens in a country, in a state, to come together to decide, okay, I'm giving up some of my freedom in return for a benefit, a gain. I think it's going to be a benefit for me to have laws and some safety regulations and so forth. So I think those to me are the critical issues that I think we're losing sight of, which is we're not in America about creating this big, call it party in quotes, whether you call it a political party or a gathering. We are in the place where the individual is the most important, and then those individuals decide to live within a system, United States of America, state of Arizona, local communities, that give up some of their freedoms in return for the benefits. And we've lost sight of that. And we've lost sight of it over the last 50 years, probably post World War II. And now no one talks about it. We talk about it very aggressively in our book.
Yeah. Chuck, the economic issue, the I'm going to address this from a different standpoint with you, but if you were thinking about what you believe are going to be the biggest issues that we're going to have to address, not our party, but anybody running for political office at the federal or at the state level, where would you think that's going to be? Is that going to be on economic issues? Is it going to be on the fronts that we're seeing today, on kind of the social extremes? Where do you see it going?
On the state level, you've hit it right. It's the economy is the biggest bellwether that voters are going to follow. And this era we are now in, where one person is controlling the entire economy, it seems like, is highly problematic. And we're now going to see this play out in front of the Supreme Court on the tariffs issue. The other issue is the one Dr. Neal's been talking about, is education. Where are we at? How are we going to fund this? Arizona has a proud tradition of choice in public education. And, I worked for a governor that started that back in the 90s. But the bottom line is, as you pointed out earlier, it comes with an obligation to fund it. And so what are you doing to fund choice, to hold accountability to a standard? These are all state questions. These are all critical state questions that I think are the two most important issues in Arizona is the economy, education, how to fund public education, how to hold people accountable. The third one I'd put out there right now, at least in Arizona, would be water, Paul. As what is our water future like? How are we managing to get there? And what are we doing to secure a sustainable long-term water supply for Arizona?
Sarah, you've spent a lot of time on education. And again, then you flipped over to reform. I find that to be interesting. But talk to me about education and the programs that you've been involved with and where you see the greatest needs existing from an educational standpoint.
Well, education has, in my lifetime, always been valued as a societal benefit. And we've had good public schools, we've had public research universities. We've had a system that really rested very heavily on that base. And today, it's crumbling rapidly. And it's a great concern for anyone who's involved on the philanthropic side of education, because philanthropy has always been aimed more at funding things that the public can't afford, whether it's merit scholarships or whether it's high risk research or whatever it is. And philanthropy in general is quite minuscule compared to the cost of education overall. And so right now it's very alarming, because we're getting proposals, for example, to help fund teacher pay or to keep a research program going at the university that's been going on for a long time in basic research. And none of it, in my mind, is optional. We have to find a way to make the system work from the top to the bottom. And there can't just be a massive withdrawal of public funding with the expectation that somehow industry and philanthropy and, parents, whoever, are going to come in and fill that void. And when that doesn't happen, then the education doesn't happen. The research doesn't happen. And I fear that makes our country a lot less strong and more vulnerable.
Yeah, and for me, I find there is, the choice issue. I agree with Chuck. I think choice is important. Parents should have choices. I also believe that what we should want from choice is we should want to try to get better outcomes from our students, and we should want to make certain that that we're increasing the academic scores of our children and try to reduce fraud in that process. My concern oftentimes is that without the right type of regulatory reforms that are necessary to be able to make certain you're getting accountability, you can end up with it being highly problematic. But the good news that's happening in these reforms with choice is I think you're getting a bigger audience of people who are now increasingly becoming more concerned and supportive of funding. I think the attack on education is oftentimes misplaced. I think most people really do want a robust, good educational system. They understand that that's fundamental to us being able to build out the right type of labor force and for us being able to be successful economically. The challenge to it has been we haven't created the right coalition, I think, that can ensure that you do get both reforms and funding. All right, so I'm coming to the top of the hour.
I think you were key when it's like the accountability piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where a lot of skepticism comes in. And I think sometimes it's misplaced skepticism, but other times it is not. So I think that has to be a focus.
I think for me,
yeah.
And I agree with you, because the biggest thing for me, and especially in my campaign when I speak to people, it's all about three things: accountability, case by case situations for those that are in choice, and then also being transparent. People have to be transparent about what's actually going on and where the funding's going and how the funding is being utilized. But if you throw out that accountability piece, and I think that's a huge component of it, that's where people feel like, well, I can just do whatever I want. And that's where we get the situations that we've been reading about.
Yeah. And to me, the accountability holds, there are two parts to it. One part of the accountability is the whole question of, if you give out vouchers, let's say you give out, I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's $7,000 per kid and you have 5 kids, you've just created an economic incentive for people to take $35,000 in if their kids don't go to school. And there's no guarantee they're going to perform better in that. So trying to ensure that you're testing those kids as you're going along and making certain that the kids are advancing, I think we do have a role in, that we play a role in trying to make certain that they're being helped. The other part of accountability, though, is we have to be accountability to the ability for these kids to become productive. The job force is changing dramatically. I mean, what's going to happen with AI technology, what is happening inside of technology today will be nothing short of transformational in our economy. But there still will be big needs that we're going to have, and education is going to play a massive role. My guess is it's going to have to also play a role in being able to help retrain people at a bigger level than we're doing today. So it not only has to be accountable in terms of the money that's being spent, but I think we also have to be accountable to make certain that we're providing the right type of workforce that's important not only for the business community, but for these people to pay back student loans. All right.
Exactly. That's where I can't wait for you to do the educational part, because I have a whole plan on CTE and being able to address not only those students without disabilities, but those with disabilities, and what is the future plan to make sure that they can live a productive life and be able to take care of themselves as well.
All right. I promise to keep these to an hour. That is kind of my goal. And again, the goal is going to be to make certain that we have repetition with them, so people begin to understand that they're coming on, and it gives people a chance to be able to ask questions. I don't think we have any questions. Any hands raised, Darby, other than what we've already called upon?
Your comment,
Ted,
Paul, just
yes.
real quick. To Chuck's point, third party is a challenge, really. To realistically expect that we're going to elect a slate of candidates, it's a long shot. Possible, but it's a long shot. But I think something Dr. Neal said is illustrative of how it can help, because he said that when he goes to events, he's invited by Democrats and Republicans to the events, which means they're listening to what he's saying, and they realize that they may have to be receptive to the middle if they want those votes. So this is a perfect example of how a third party can help transform the political landscape, even if we don't win at the ballot in terms of electing candidates initially.
Yeah, and Ted, I would just tell you, I agree with that. I think that there are 3 possibilities, but the most important one here is this can't be a short-term effort. If we're doing this just for the 2026 campaign, good luck. We're not gonna be happy with it. There has to be, the voters and the candidates have to be convinced that we're here long term. So I'm here for 2026, 2028, and 2030. To me, 3 campaigns I think are going to be important for us to really make momentum. The second thing that I would say is if you get 10% of the vote, you definitely have begun to change things, because if people recognize that they need the center, it will change the dialogue of people on the right and the left. Now, that's not a great incentive for candidates who are going, well, you mean I'm going to run and I'm just going to be a sacrificial lamb, right? Well, here's my answer to that. First, maybe in some cases we will be. That's okay. You're a part of something bigger. You're helping change. Our whole reason for wanting to run for office, the reason I ran for office, is because we wanted to make things better. Just in running and in taking part and in telling the right and the left, you can't keep ignoring this group of people who are the mainstream voters. I'm not going to call them the middle, because they're not the middle. They're mainstream voters. They're Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, people who are in this mainstream group, and they're concerned about their country, regardless of what side they're coming from. We can be helpful in pulling them back together, so long as we don't become the same divisive voice that they are. So long as we recognize that the things that bind us together, being a part of something bigger, matters. You know, I've had discussions with Chuck on this concept, but I fundamentally really believe that if you look at those rights that Larry was talking about, he and I had a lot of discussions about this, and sometimes a little different point of view. I love that line. We're endowed upon by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, meaning these rights that we have, civil rights, equal rights, human rights, property rights, we owe that to a greater force. It's not just something one man can rightfully take away from us, that we're bound together by that. And when we are bound together by that, I'm convinced economically it makes a massive difference. Our goal is we're creating a pathway. Some people may get through, some people may win, but we're going to create the pathway. And it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of people putting in a lot of effort. And I want candidates who think that they can win, but I also want candidates who are committed to the long-term benefit of this state and this country, not just the short-term benefits of an election. One of my favorite sayings, and I'll end it with this, is that the difference between a representative and a politician is that politicians tend to think about what's in the best interest of the next election. Representatives try to think about what's in the best interest of the next generation. This is about generational change. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll be back next month and do another show.
Rock, Paul.
Thanks.